Hi, it's Dave Michels from TalkingPointz. I'm with Dave Danto. Hello, David.
Hello, Dave. How are you today?
Good. I have a feeling this is going to be like a 20-hour episode, but this is going to be a good one. We got a great show lined up here. We are going to talk about headsets. And when I say headset, you probably have no idea what I'm talking about because there's everything from giant, huge headphones to little tiny earbuds, and there's call center, whatever. So there's an important thing to note about headsets is there's a lot of different types. So we're going to be talking about different types. We're going to talk about different connectivity. We're going to be talking about different eras. And so, David, I want to start you off here with a real interesting question that I can't wait to hear the answer because I want to share mine. Um, before we get into the contemporary lineup, what is, I think you're 95 or something, 95 years old, what is in your career your favorite headset that you remember? What is the one that stands out?
Well, I'm gonna answer that question, but I'm gonna go sideways first. The interesting thing is we've now developed into an era of collaboration and communication where it's not enough to have one device. If I'm having a conversation with you on video like I am now from my desk, I'm using a microphone on the table. I'm using an open speaker because there's nobody else in my office. But I have a different headset that I use when I'm in an airport, and I have a different headset that I use when I'm in somebody's office. And I have so the modern executives, modern communicators, whatever level they are in an organization, know for sure that they need to have more than one headset based on their circumstances. Now, you don't need like a bundle like I have, but you have to
Yeah,
a difference. I am actually still very fond of the Poly Voyager 360s. These
I
came.
remember that came out. That's a current still a current model. You can still get those.
It's still a current model, although they made a smaller version now. The interesting thing about these is these were the first control case where you could start and stop music. You could use the case as a Bluetooth transmitter and plug it into like an airplane if you were flying. The case has multiple charges for the headsets. It's giving you data and details. You can change the type of noise cancellation. And I'm a control freak. So even though I have some better earbuds than these, I actually really like them. I had also been using, and I know you're familiar with it when I was working for Poly, I had been using the 6200s, the one that was the neck band with the earpieces, and I would have to.
Yes, with the red. They had the red
Right, red,
cords.
exactly.
Yes.
And I would have to pack the case when I traveled because you don't want to keep it loose, you want to have it available.
Yeah.
And when
Yeah.
it came changing, packing a case this big to throwing that in my pocket,
Yeah.
this became
Yeah.
my go-to headset for travel. And I think the quality is good. It's probably, if I were to do it on a scale of, 0 to 100, these are probably like 85, 90 in terms of the quality that I'm looking for. Both.
It's funny you say that because I'm pretty excited when those UC Freeze came out, and I got one of the very first ones that came out, and I was so excited about it, and I liked them. They were okay, but mine kind of just disintegrated, and I mean they literally just kind of disintegrated. And I talked to the product manager at Plantronics about it. He said, "Yeah, the first batch, we made some changes, and so I think they got them a lot better. But that first batch was uh, kind of like a disappearing message or something, or a snap message. But but it was a great concept design. When it comes to my favorite, it's funny because so far we've talked a lot about Plantronics. I have to say, I'll give a little salute here of the Plantronics. They were very generous. They gave out. I worked with Plantronics for a long time, and so I've got a lot of different memories of different products but they were very generous. They often send out an evaluation unit, and so I've got a lot of memories associated with Plantronics. But the favorite headset that from Plantronics or even from in general that I still cherish is called, I forget. I think they were called the. Oh no, I forgot the name now. But they were rubberized, and they were it was a little wrapped around the they were like a sport, a Plantronic sport or something like that, and they went
I
into your ear, but they didn't block your ear. This was the important part of the design was they allowed traffic and car noise and whatever dogs barking. You can still hear that while you're out doing your walk and doing so. they were weatherproof, and they were sharp looking.
And
They were
sweatproof, and you
bright
could get them
colors.
in blue and pink, and yeah, I still have a pair somewhere. The difficulty with a lot of the plant, first of all, the Plantronics headsets were great, and you know, I always say a prayer and close my eyes when I think about what happened to Plantronics, then to Polycom, then to Poly, then to HP. And I don't think there's anybody
Yeah,
that would recognize a headset if they tripped over one. But what I didn't like about those headsets is they're not repairable. They have built-in batteries, and when the battery
yeah.
goes, you toss them.
Well,
And
I'm glad you brought that up, and you're right, because when those started disappearing, me and my son loved them because he likes to wear them when he bikes. Started buying them up. You know, we're like, we'd find them on eBay or whatever, we'd buy them up, and they came, and they often were dead. I mean, they looked like they were still in a factory sealed package or something like that.
Mhm.
They were on the gray market, but the those internal batteries died, and they're not the only ones that do that. A lot of these earbuds have non-replaceable. They're basically disposable. You might be paying $400 or $500 for them, and people don't realize they're disposable. They're banking that you're going to have a new pair by the time these things die, but they often have batteries in them that you can't replace.
At
But
CES a
let's get
couple of
into
years ago, at CES a couple of years ago, I found a company that actually had created a prototype. They were in Eureka Park of a headset with a replaceable battery. And I thought it was really exciting. And I introduced them to a few companies. It never went anywhere. And I think we have to admit that it never went anywhere because the business model is the obsolescence of the product. They want you to keep buying new headsets.
yeah.
The big brother, the man, whatever you want to call it. It's the whole idea is that you can't replace an iPhone battery. You've got to get the next generation of the product. So I think there's some design factor in that.
And in their defense, Bluetooth keeps changing, the phones keep changing. So, there's some degree that maybe there is some technology obsolescence. So why not put a disposable battery? But it's a little frustrating because we come from an era where, if you took care of something, it would last a long, long time.
Exactly.
So I know everyone's going to want to talk about earbuds, but I'm going to hold off on earbuds for just a minute. Let's start off. Let's start off with some of the bigger units. Let me ask you your opinion on boom microphone or no microphone. Because a lot of headsets have no boom microphone. What are your thoughts on that?
They all work, and I'll leave.
I'm talking about bigger headsets, maybe for
I
a
understand.
contact
Yeah,
center. Or,
I have.
yeah.
I
Okay.
have. You would be surprised. We'll see what we're going to talk about. What I'm going to pull out. It's a show and tell episode, folks. I have a pair over here, and they had a number of different brand names. Bose was the first one, and then Poly had some, and whatever. They work. The problem that you ran into with a lot of these headsets is that you're dealing with a lot of programming to try and figure out what do I capture and what don't I capture. And when it works well, it's great. But when it doesn't work well, there's nothing you can really do. In my best Scotty, you cannot change the laws of physics, Captain. The
Yeah.
microphones that are closer to your mouth that have additional microphones in the boom arm to reject wind noise and other things will always perform better than boomless headsets. The boomless headsets are pretty good, with some AI algorithms in there. It's not so again, depends on what you're looking for. I've never
Yeah. So
liked the sweaty feeling of having big cups over my ears. When Bose Quiet Comfort first came out, that was the big deal. You saw every flyer carrying one because it was a status symbol, like a Rolex or a first class
I remember
upgrade.
that. Yeah.
But I couldn't. In fact, American Airlines actually gave them away to their flyers. But I never liked
They
that.
didn't give them away to all flyers. You had to be in the whatever club, but
Right. Well, I
um,
scored a pair after flying
not the
first
Mile
class,
High Club either. But
and
yeah.
I loved them. And then my wife needed some, and I gave them to my wife, and that's just like a never-ending chute of garbage. Once it's given to my wife, I'll never see them again. She'll never use
Well,
them.
the thing is, because the technology changed, and so my first pair of those quiet Bose Comfort whatever were of course corded, and there was a long, corded was the only way to go for a long time. Bluetooth, when Bluetooth was new, it still was pretty bad. So Bluetooth has come a long way. I just had to buy a Bluetooth thing, and it was very clear in the instructions: be sure you get Bluetooth 4. It's like most people don't even pay attention to this stuff, but most modern smartphones, most laptops now support Bluetooth 4, and it's a lot more capable than it used to be. And so we've come a long way. Now, one thing about the boom that I want to say is that because you're right, I've worn those headphones. I was walking through like a trade show floor, very noisy environment. And the person I was talking to had no problem hearing me, which is amazing because I couldn't hear myself. But and so, in that sense, the remarkable technology. However, the nature of my work, I'm in the Impossible Missions Force. I have a lot of very confidential information, and the problem if you don't have a boom is you can't whisper. And so someone's asking me my ATM code, and I want to say Bosco. I really want to whisper that. It's a Seinfeld reference for anyone who didn't get that. But you want to be able to whisper, and you can whisper with a boom. And so, if you happen to be in the Impossible Missions Force or some sort of secret agent or something like that, like myself, you may want to prioritize a boom microphone.
Agreed.
Another thing on the because contact center stuff, they tend to buy cheaper headsets.
Yes.
But there's a couple things that are really important. So noise management is really important. The boom we already talked about. Another thing I want to talk about is Bluetooth versus DECT versus wired. What is your take on that?
Well, I'm a big believer that contact center agents that are working in a contact center in a large, bay of computer terminals and everything else really need to go wired, because there's too many other things that can interfere with what's going on. This is one of the original Blackwire headsets that Plantronics used to make. You could tell it's one of the originals because the Blackwire actually has a black wire. The newer black wires have a red wire, and don't ask me to explain that. I have no idea. But you notice they almost look like the headsets that you used to be able to get on airplanes. Very, they're more
Yeah.
comfortable, but there's not a lot to them. There's a boom, there's a wire, and maybe a quick connector, and that's it. And when you're talking about buying headsets for 1,000 people, where you're throwing out 5 a week because of damage or stepping or whatever, it's getting the cheaper one is something that a lot
No,
of
Blackwire is still a pretty modern headset. You're holding it up there as a legacy item. Let me just ask you, what kind of wire connector is on that prop you just showed us?
Well, the Plantronics in the day had a proprietary connector called a quick connect connector that you can see
Yeah,
here, how
yeah,
much of it you can see. And then
yeah.
depending upon what you would need, like to connect that to at one point a Cisco C60 that I had in the room, I had to get a connector that turns that into 2 analog jacks for microphones.
Okay, all right. So that's what I was going to try to get to. And so the wired headsets telephones in particular are very proprietary. So there's a lot of different issues with what wire you needed. But even on the music side, there was the small jack, there was the big jack, there's the airplane thing with the 2 jacks. But now we've kind of moved. Now, if you were going to go buy those black wires, there's a good chance I think they would be available in the Bluetooth format. Is that a reasonable statement?
You can get Bluetooth, but I don't. Again, I think wired in a large
Okay,
bay.
okay. Let's go back to the USB format. And
USB, yes.
so, and so we went from the proprietary wiring to a USB, which is a little more universal. We used to have a big black box to convert it to USB, and I think now it's gotten a lot smaller or invisible.
Yeah.
But
Well, they now actually come with USB-C and USB, the adapters on the wire. So
oh, that's true. I've seen that.
no more
Yeah,
getting the adapter, and I think that was actually really a cool thing to do. But the Bluetooth and whether Bluetooth works in your situation or whether you need to have something that's more secure and higher quality really depends on the density. I wake up in the morning and I come down to my kitchen and I get a notice from one of my programs that Bluetooth is off. Bluetooth is not off. You're just in a in a forest of Bluetooth and you can't figure it out. So that's not
yeah.
a good application for Bluetooth, as opposed to DECT, DECT is frequency to frequency. It's higher distance, higher resolution, higher quality, goes longer distance, and you can put more of them in a space. So
Yeah, yeah, very, very important, and that is why this is an interesting part of the evolution. So Bluetooth was never really practical on something like an airplane, which frustrated people because they wanted Bluetooth on the airplanes.
right.
But they solved that. A lot of the newer planes now are putting Bluetooth on, and they solved it by putting the lowest power Bluetooth. I mean, it's literally got a range of about 3 feet on that thing, which
Right.
is actually a very clever way of solving it. They pretty much know where you're sitting, so they very clever. I thought that was pretty clever. But
Now, the other thing that's evolution that we should really talk about very briefly, we were talking about the strategies with the microphone, but we also want to talk about the strategies with the ear, which you mentioned. The Aftershocks, which is now Shocks, makes a bone conduction headset, which if you've ever used it for UC, which I have, at least their first generation, I haven't used the latest one. But the sound is a little bit more muffled than you would like it to be. It's not very bright. It doesn't have a lot of, so it's hard to distinguish voices in a crowded environment. They've
well,
actually
often when we talk, I think you're not very bright.
well, I've tried to adjust the brightness on the TV, but the content doesn't get any smarter. So that's an old Gallagher joke. The so that's one of the issues. But the other issue is, how do I keep my ear clear? How do I make sure that I don't miss an important call at a trade show or at some other place where I'm walking around and cry? So we used to use stuff like this. And again, I have the stock of the Plantronics here, but Yealink makes one that looks exactly like this. Let's not get into that conversation, and a few others do. But it covers one ear and it keeps the other ear open for a conversation. And this used to be the strategy for how I can have a conversation with you and yet still not, have an issue. What's happened now is many of the manufacturers coming out of Asia and some here in the US have switched to a model that looks like this. These are the clear headsets that you and I have both tried, and I've got a demo of this on video. I'll try and put a link in for it. But this sits over your ear. It's not covering my ear in any way. And I did a
Yeah.
45-minute phone call with somebody yesterday when I was at an industry event. They heard me just fine. I didn't raise my voice. I heard
No,
them.
no, you come right back to earbuds here. I can't wait to talk about these clear ones because I got a pair right here. I didn't know they're called clear though. I thought they were called talking points.
Yeah,
But
talking. Load your own
but
logo. Get a picture of Taylor Swift
we're
on
going
it.
to dive into earbuds here real quickly, but real soon. But before we get into the earbuds, I think you made a really interesting point though about the bone conduction technology, or I don't know, conduct. I think it's the word conduction. I I um obviously you don't hear through your bones, and so the same way you hear through your ears, I should say. So your point there about it being not as bright, I think is important. Now there's been two interesting evolutions of that, and the first evolution was an over the ear and bone conduction. My son has a pair of those. He raves about them. I have not tried them, but it's bone conducting in the front and over the ear, like you just described, on the back. And he raves about it. And again, he's into bicycling, so he needs to be able to hear traffic and stuff like that. I have a friend of mine who's a swimmer, and he bought a brand. It wasn't the same. What's the brand that makes the bone shocks? I think it's called. It was a different brand, and the issue here was because when you're swimming, the Bluetooth isn't very good, and so he had to get. He has like this little boom box. He sits next to the pool, which is not a Bluetooth transmitter. It's more like a deck or something like that receiver. I don't know what it is. And then he goes in with the bone conducting, and I don't know if it has over the ear or not, but it might. But he swims with it, and he says it's great, and he really really enjoying swimming. It's amazing to me that you can now go swimming with good earphones or headphones.
Well, audio
Blows my mind.
propagation will work through the air, but it works very poorly through a medium of water. So that's a case where bone conduction would really work well. And
Yeah,
it's the difference between a slightly muffled sound and no sound at all. And Shocks has also started to make companies for the disabled population, make headsets for the disabled population that help improve hearing and do some other things. So kudos to them finding that niche. Uh, it's just one of many choices that you're able to make when you're doing a headset.
yeah. Okay, so one more thing before we get into the earbuds. Hi-fi, hi-fi. What if you want to listen to your favorite music at home in your living room after other people have gone to sleep? What do you reach for?
Those are the cases where I'll use an over the ear headset. And actually the and again I have a large stock of poly because I work there. But I have an old Plantronics before it was UC capable. That was when they still had the consumer brand. I have an old one of those which is both wired and Bluetooth. And that's my go-to unit. I keep it charged. I can pull it out and listen to music. I don't do
Yeah.
that as often as I used to. Most of the times when I'm listening to music, it's when I'm on an airplane and I'm too tired to keep my eyes open.
I have an old pair of Plantronics like that. I don't think they ever went to market. I think Plantronics sent it to me before they like an early testing whatever kit, and I forget what it was called. Plantronics One, something like that. A really high end, very high quality headphone. I still have them, but again, they've disintegrated because they didn't really have the right materials for the. So I've got electrical tape all over it, trying to cover up all the stuff where the material was.
Well,
But
let's
I'll
pause
tell
there for
you,
a second because that's actually a really important point that we need to get to briefly, tangentially, is companies have been trying to figure out form factor in addition to audio quality and propagation. The ones you were describing before were a loose band around the back of the neck. And there
yeah,
are companies that make one that was a hard band around the neck and put it in there, and the hard band would vibrate if you were getting a call.
yeah.
You have over the head, you have, some of these things which it's smaller and over the head with a shorter boom. These are the Jabra evolves, but
Yep, yep.
it's what is the form factor that people like? And you run into a
Even
very
even in earbuds, or over the
even air
ear, in the ear, on the ear. Yep, yeah,
correct.
yeah,
And the answer is there's no right answer because people have their favorites, and it varies. I know men tend to more like very big over the ear pieces than typically ladies do. Ladies tend to like
yeah.
to have earbuds more because they don't mess up their hair, which is
Well,
where
again, well, earbuds weren't a choice 30 years ago, right? And
right.
and so you had to have over the head, and yeah, it messed up the hair, messed up the hats you might want to wear, well, all kinds of issues. And so now there's all this choice, and it's such a strong preference. It's a very, very strong preference.
Yeah.
Um, so I just was going to say about about the hi-fi stuff. Now, I haven't done a lot of comparison shopping with over the hi-fi stuff. Those tend to be higher end headphones, but I tell you, I'm a sucker. My first job in high school was working in a stereo store, and we were a normal stereo store, but right across the mall was the Bang& Olufsen store, and I've always been a sucker for Bang& Olufsen. I just love that stuff, and I think one of the most interesting brand things that came out was Cisco and Bang& Olufsen getting together, and they've now got a whole line. But when they first launched, it was just one very high end over
Mhm.
the ear living room type of headphone that was also a headset you could use for meetings. And I thought that was a really interesting brand stuff. So I have no idea whether they're the best headphones out there or not, and compare them. But I take a lot of pride in knowing that I've got a pair of B&O high end headphones because
Well,
I've
let me
always
make
loved
two
that.
points about that. The first one is you have to understand the history of our industry a little bit. Snorri Kespu, who's in charge of, oh God, he's in charge of everything, collaboration, the products, everything that's going on. He had retired a number of years ago, left Cisco, didn't want to go to a competitor because he felt a lot of loyalty for the brand, and he went to work for Bang& Olufsen for a couple of years. And
Yeah,
that he's bridged that relationship, and he brought over a couple of people as well from the design side. So that's one of the reasons that that relationship came up. I go back to the science when it comes to high-end headsets. Now you can kind of see over my shoulder, hidden behind the TalkingPointz Pick Hits badges. I've been a judge for the CES Innovation Awards on and off for the last 17 or so years, and a couple of years I do the high-end audio. And when I look at the high-end audio devices to judge, huh? There was one year there was a $5,000 pair of headphones.
yeah,
And I go back to the science and I say, human hearing at its best, and I'm miles past that, is 20
yeah.
hertz to 20,000 hertz.
Yeah,
Nobody's
for
going to get you
for
more
younger
than that.
humans than us, but yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Nobody's going to get you more than that. They can maintain less, noise, less static, be true and
yeah,
clearer. People who are claiming that they hear better sound when they take a marker going around the edge of the CD, or they take a $300 headset and a $3,000 headset, and they can tell you that they hear the difference. There's very little difference other than what you're doing in terms of reference audio. The best, most
yeah,
expensive industry headsets are the ones that are not doing anything to the sound. Tell me what it feels
yeah,
like naked. But the $5,000 headsets one year, I mean, my rating for that was, are you effing kidding?
yeah, yeah,
That's a status symbol. That's not a any kind of audio quality. So yeah, I've experienced that. But the brand, like, you and I both love the Cisco Bang& Olufsen earbuds. And I know we're not on earbuds yet, but this is the co-branded one that you were talking about. Do the headsets work really well? Yes. Are they branded really nicely? Yes. Where in the case did they leave room for the damn dongle? I've got it taped on here with a piece of tape. So, that's they're missing Gavin Ivester. Gavin should have fixed this, but he's switched sides. He's now on the Cisco side. But the key here is it's not always just the sound. It's the accessory. It's the package. It's the brand. It's the battery life. It's a lot of other things
Well,
that are into it.
Well, I'll counter that because I got the same thing right here, and I'll counter that and I'll say I've never ever used that dongle. So the question is, I don't have it taped on. I've never used it. I don't care about it. And so the question is, like you said, we have different headsets for different things, and
Correct.
so I use these typically when I travel, and I'm just using Bluetooth. And so the question is, and that's why we have some different headsets, is how do you design it for? Who is the use case you're designing it for? Um, but So you made me think of two different thoughts there, David. One of them is, you talk about how AI is changing all this stuff in these fancy headsets and what they're doing to and it's the same thing's happening in photography, right? Because these new smartphones are getting so fancy. You can tell they're manipulating the picture, and sometimes just the beauty of art going through light going through a lens is just what you want. So it's that same thing. But the other thing I want to mention that you triggered on was reference audio. Yes, 20,000 hertz on the high end is what the human ear is capable of. Most of us can't get that high. And as you get older, we lose that stuff, which is why, because one of the differences between FM and AM radio is FM can go much higher frequency than AM can, which is why old people love AM radio. They're not missing anything on AM radio. It sounds the same to me because they've lost all those higher frequencies. But anyway, so let's get back to headsets here. So,
I think we need to talk about differentiators because that's really what we're buying right now. Whether you're buying portability, whether you're buying features, whether you're buying quality, whether you're buying brand. I mean, this is a headset that got sent to me by a company called Vaim, VAIM. It's called the Rec Dot, and if you look very carefully, there's the dot. Okay, so you put these on. You put them on, you listen to music, you listen to whatever you like. It works just fine. The case is key charging, so you can stick it on a key charger and it works just fine. But if I'm having this conversation with you in the wild, we met at an airport or at a coffee shop, and I want to record the conversation and transcribe it, you press the button, or you can press the button on the app, or I think there's a way to do it on the earpiece as well. And all of a sudden it's recording both parts of the conversation, and it's not recording it to Teams, and it's not recording it to Zoom, and it's not recording it to any other walled garden. It's recording it to your phone and instantly transcribing it. And then you can.
Well, I'm just gonna put on my old man glasses here, and I'm gonna say, is it also putting a recording tone on the line? Beep.
I don't know if it's doing that. I haven't used it for that. I've used it for the conversation because I'll still use the recording in Zoom when I'm doing Zoom and the recording in Teams when I'm doing Teams. The convenience of this, you're going to start to see more and more products coming to market, is I can casually record the conversation. Most of
so I just want to point out the recording laws are actually really weird. Recording on telephone is what the laws were written for. So some states require that you had to notify, and then they do the tone and stuff like that. Those laws don't really apply to meetings necessarily,
Right.
And they don't apply to conversations that you might have in person, and so it's really interesting how and they also don't apply to transcripts, and so you could have an AI technology create a complete transcript without having to do a recording notifications. You didn't actually record the conversation. So
Correct.
it's really kind of talk about how the laws have become obsolete from their intent. But all right, let's dive in here to earbuds, because you raise a really important issue here. And so I travel with these that we just held up with Cisco. One of my favorite features on these is indeed noise reduction. And so traveling a lot, you want to block out that jet sound. Now, that was the killer feature you mentioned earlier of the Bose Quiet Comforts and the big over-the-ear. That was what made them so popular. And people would even put them on, even if they weren't listening to music or anything, just because they did such a nice job. It's amazing technology. It's actually just absolutely amazing technology what's going on to make that happen. I never would have thought it would be possible, because the whole idea is it's covering your ear, and then it's canceling the noise. I would never thought that would be possible with an earbud that's not covering your ear, but the same technology works pretty well. And so when it comes to traveling, I don't do an over-the-ear type of
Correct.
headphone because these are specifically designed to let that noise in. So I think you really have to think about what is your uh, purpose, and these would be terrible for a bike ride. These would be terrible for
Right.
things where you need to be able to hear a little bit of background noise.
And
Um,
interestingly, at this past CES, there was a company whose name escapes me right now that was doing a headset in that same form factor that Clear had, over the ear, not in the ear, that was including noise cancellation. And I said, "You're kidding? How can you do that if you're not blocking the ear?" They said, "We can do it. It's not great, but we can do it." And I put it on, and he's right. It took down about 5 or 6 dB of the
yeah,
noise in the general area. So it's active noise cancellation is simply picking up the noise around you and creating the inverse of it going into your ears. So they're able even to do that with open ear headsets, which I think is a
now
cool.
now we've talked about noise. Let's talk about germaphobes, because these clear headsets have a germaphobe feature. Why don't you explain that one?
Yeah, if you take the headset out and you put it back in the case and close it, the case tells you that it
No,
is
there it is. Oh, there it is. Yep, yep.
UVC sterilizing. Now, having lived through a pandemic, I don't think anybody ever proved that UVC actually sterilizes anything, but it might. So it definitely makes people feel better that it's on the unit amongst its many features.
I,
Um,
I have to say, I would feel better if the battery went from full to empty when it did that. I'd feel better like it was putting thousands of voltage into this UVC stuff. But it has a battery in here and it does several charges. But I have no idea whether it's a gimmick or not. But why not? Why not put that feature in there?
and
So
and that
uh,
that they do that form factor. Those Clear Arc 3 is the model that we're talking about. They make a version for gaming, which is the one that has the dongle. So if you want to use it with your computer, you need that one. It's also got a lower latency, which is important to gamers. They make a version for sports. The sports version will give you heart rate and do other readings that you can get through your ear. So that's very nice. And then they make one for general music. So, again, we're starting to see these differentiators, and you have to figure out which ones are important to you. An important point to make, we were talking about the recording ones and some of the other ones. Most of the UC platforms that we talk to, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, I don't know if Google's talked about it yet, but they've talked about how they're coming up with features where you can take your smart device, your mobile or your phone, and put it on a table and record an impromptu meeting. And that's an added feature where instead of you're just transcribing a call, you're transcribing an impromptu conversation. The problem with that, in my mind, is I would need to give up my mobile device for the half-hour conversation I'm having. And I would start feeling, like itching down my back. It's like, am I getting any emails and what's going on in the world? And I'm disconnected from my device and oh my God, help, help. So I've also seen some third-party products that are like the size of a card that do exactly the same thing that you plug into your computer or those headphones or whatever, where you don't have to give up your mobile device. So again, it's all if we're deciding on headphones, if we've passed the quality barrier and we've passed the battery life barrier, and now we're deciding on features, we're doing the right thing.
interesting. Um, we've talked about a number of brands. We've talked a lot about Plantronics. We've talked a little bit about Cisco. We've talked a little bit about Logi. Um, we talked about Clear. One big player that hasn't come up yet is Jabra, and Jabra's they're the first ones. I don't know if they're the first ones that actually did it, but the first ones that I came across that had the we've talked a lot about the passive noise, but they're the
Right.
first ones that had an earbud that had a microphone on the outside, and you could adjust on your app how much transparency you wanted of the outside noise to come into the inside.
Yep.
I always thought that was a brilliant feature. And again, I don't know if they were actually the first to deliver that, but they're the first ones that I had. And I thought it was a brilliant feature because I love those Plantronics. I told you about those the bright corded ones for that
Right.
very feature. The problem I had with that is there was just a slight delay. And so you hear this noise would happen, and you kind of hear it, and then it comes in a little bit later on the headphones. But I thought that was actually pretty clever. And Jabra is a pretty major headphone maker, but especially now that Plantronics has dropped off. I mean,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Jabra is owned by GN Communications, which is their primary business is hearing aids, and they've done some really good things with that. There's also an interesting product that came on the market from a company called Luxottica, which you may or may not have ever heard of, but they make 99% of the glasses in the world. So
Yeah.
whatever brand you're talking about,
Ray
whether
Ban, they
it's
make Ray-Bans.
Ray-Ban or anything else, they make everything. They came out with something they called Nuance a couple of years ago, which has just gotten FDA approved a few months ago, where the microphones are here in the temples of a plastic pair of glasses, and the speaker's just over your ear. And it's for
Yeah.
people like me that are starting to, lose some of those high ends, where I can look at somebody and I can hear them a little bit better. I think that's an interesting product. Now, the glasses look horrible. They're dorky. They're black. Plastic glasses, but that's an interesting feature. And you're starting to see some fringe companies starting to add features that would be really interesting.
Yeah, so that's where we're going with Facebook because they've got the Ray-Ban glasses and they've got
Right.
the speakers. And this is actually, I have really bad face blind. I can never remember anyone's names or faces, whatever. So I love the idea of having this AI remind me of who somebody is or something like that. I think that's just brilliant. And be able to record stuff, I think that's brilliant. But we're not quite there yet, at least to at least I'm not there yet, but maybe it's coming.
And we
Um,
did mention Logi. I should just point out Logi has made a very big deal over the last year and a half, talking about how they've removed the dongle, that they're now doing high bandwidth audio connections to PCs or whatever without needing to plug in a dongle. And I know that Plantronics had worked on that for a little while as well. I haven't tried them, but again, feature differentiation is what's going to matter.
Yeah, there's actually, if we want to list all the brands, a lot of great brands have come and gone. Sennheiser's always been a great name in audio, and I actually was really excited. I got my son another category, aviation headphones. And Plantronics does a good job in aviation headphones for the big jets, but in the little jets where you need a lot of noise protection, Plantronics doesn't do that. But Sennheiser has this beautiful set, and I remember getting them for my son, and they said, "This is Sennheiser, it's a great brand." Blah 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 blah. Well, they discontinued those like a year later, so it's a shame.
That was a more of a business thing where Demont had owned, you had Sennheiser and you had EPOS, and then they separated out, and I think they've been trying to flip EPOS, and they haven't had success with doing that yet. So it's kind of hard to keep track of the patent place going on over there.
yeah, a lot of stuff going on there. So earbuds. I think we've already covered everything without even talking about the earbuds yet. So what kind of earbud? What kind of earbuds? What are your go-to earbuds?
Well, we already talked about the Poly Voyager 360. My next set are the Bose headsets that Hilton gave me because I became a lifetime diamond. So these,
Nice.
without a doubt, are the best sounding earbuds that I've ever had. When you put them in your ear, they send a blast of noise in your ear, very, very low. It doesn't hurt you, and it actually specs out the ear canal and adjusts it for you. And when I put these on an airplane, I don't hear the airplane at all, which kind of scares me a little bit because I kind of like to hear if we're crashing or if there's an announcement coming on board. But these are probably the best sounding ones. But I still use these as secondary when I'm.
Nothing you can do if it's crashing. You may as well enjoy the music. But I have a pair of Bose earbuds, and they don't look anything like that. I don't. I wish I would have grabbed them. Mine are like a little long thing. Yours is a deep one.
Yeah, I'll come up with the name. They're the Bose Quiet Comfort Ultra earbuds. That's what my phone knows them as. And
So those are your go-to for travel.
those well the Voyager 360s, and when those batteries need to be recharged, I switch to the Bose, and then I struggle putting the poly units back in because the Bose sounds so much better.
I see. I see. I see. I have the Bose and I have the Cisco. I tend to use the Cisco more. I think I prefer the Cisco, but my problem with these, with any of them actually, maybe it's my ears, but I always drop them. An earbud always falls out. And I kind of want them to go back to the string around them because if you're walking, on an airplane or something like that, you're walking, unloading, and it's all traffic jam. If you lose an earbud and you can't even figure out where it went, it's like really a bad thing to happen. And so I would prefer, I want to bring the cord back.
Yeah, that makes
But
sense. I'll tell you why the Bose aren't on the top of my list. It has nothing to do with the quality of the units because they're great. When I travel, I have an iPad that I use, and I have a phone that I use, and I need it to work with both of them. And the way the Bose app is designed, it can only connect to one at any one time. So with all of the other earbuds that I use on airplanes, I'm able to make a setting on one and it carries over to the other. But with the Bose, I have to literally disconnect it from one and connect it to the other so that I can adjust the app on that one. And again, it could very easily be a quirk of me not understanding how to operate it, but that's something that will prevent me from, you know what, I'm not going to screw with it. I'd rather use what's working.
We haven't mentioned, and maybe we shouldn't. We haven't mentioned the Apple AirPods. Are you an Apple user? Do you have those?
I am an Apple user. I am not an AirPod user. I was an Apple Watch user, and I've now given it up for this $25 watch that does everything that I needed to do and doesn't ask me to give a blood sample and fingerprint and all the rest of the things that you need to do when you're switching the Apple Watch around. Apple lost a customer because they made it so hard to use their product. And you know what I found? Other than the one feature that I can't seem to get on any of these watches, which is dual time zone. Um, I don't miss it for a second. I have everything that I need. I have all the step counters. I have all the time. I have the heart rate. I have everything else. It looks like an Apple Watch to the untrained eye, and it cost me again under $30. So Apple
Oh,
lost me. And the same thing. I know these earbuds that I'm talking to you about, and they'll go anywhere from $100 to $200 or $300. Apple overpriced their buds like the Beats people did because they're trying to sell the brand and the label. And I'll
yeah,
always go in the other direction. Give me the non-designer jeans. Give me the cheap reject jeans. I don't want to ever support branding for the sake of branding out of my wallet.
yeah.
That's why I don't go with Apple.
Well, I don't do the Apple just simply because I have an Android phone and they don't work so well on the Android phone. And I have a Garmin watch, by the way, and I very rarely take off my Garmin watch, and I'm charging it right now. I figured it would be safe to sit here and do a video without my Garmin watch, but I'm missing it, and I love that Garmin watch. And so no Apple in my life. I actually, well, I shouldn't say that. I use the MacBook, but I think we have to talk about because the AirPods are pretty popular. People love them. We just can't comment on them. I know they're out there.
Well,
You know.
when I was working with a brand that was competing against the AirPods, I always made the point that if you're taking a business call on them and they're not encrypted, and you only have one in your ear and the other one's back at your desk, how do you know somebody else didn't put the other earbud in and listening to your call? They weren't really set up for business communication. And I still think that. I still think they're a consumer device. There's where, from our last video, there's where you can talk about a consumer device versus a business device.
I'm not sure I'm following you on that. Are you saying that if you had something like the Cisco or something like that, that one ear wouldn't work if I left it on my desk?
I'm saying that
Aha.
the Apple AirPods are so ubiquitous. People leave them lying around all over the place. They don't think of the business application as opposed to these, where you are actually thinking of the business application. And
Okay, but they're equally secure. They're equally secure.
I don't know. Let's put a pin on that and come back to it. I've always felt that the security is a little bit stronger on some of the ones made for UC.
Okay. Um, we covered everything with that. Like I said, I kept on trying to save earbuds to the end, but I think we've covered everything on these earbuds.
Yeah, no, we've covered everything. The only thing we didn't talk about, we're not going to spend time doing today, is when you have this ability to not put in headphones. Whether you're talking about, microphones that we're both using right now, or a speaker microphone puck or something, or here's a cool one that I like that I always like to show that comes with a magnet. So I keep it in the thing above me, and you can stick it anywhere you want. It's like
It's
the
nice.
the scented thing where you ever want to have an extra thing, just shove it on the car and you've got audio. So there are a lot of those. Some are more geared for UC, some are more geared for audio, but they're small and rechargeable and really cool. So when you have the opportunity to use them, it's great to use.
All right. And more props. Did you show us everything you got?
I think I should. The only thing we didn't talk about that I guess we could talk about just a little bit is, this goes way back. This is a Plantronics Voyager. I think this is the Legend. Or this is the case for the Legend, and you can see it's in a glossy, shiny box. When you buy it, sometimes it opens up and it's got a clear thing where you can look at the product. And if you look at the latest products that are coming out, they're in plain cardboard, non-painted, definitely thinking more about sustainability. If you look at the Jabra actually spells it out for you. That's why we reduced the packaging, and so that's
Yeah.
something that you're starting to see.
And Logi's got some sort of score on there as whatever,
Right.
but it's not just. I mean, I'm kudos to them, and it's not just about sustainability. It's also because you're less likely to be buying these things in retail like you used to, and
Yeah.
so it used to go to Best. I'll say Circuit. You used to go to Circuit City and hold up that Plantronics box in an aisle and decide whether you wanted to buy it, and of course that kind of retail shopping packaging is much more important when you're clicking online and trying to looking at online pictures and whatnot. The box really doesn't matter, and so we're seeing that even buy a toaster. I mean, a toaster used to come in a big glossy box,
And also, if you
so
have less air in the box, then you can get more boxes per case and more cases per pallet, and it becomes less
yeah.
expensive to ship, and it's good for everybody.
And then on the sustainability stuff, a lot of them are using post-recycled materials, plastics. They're using less styrofoam. I mean, it is more than just the box, but and it's great to see that. It's just so unnecessary, so wasteful, and so that's great to the industry as a whole. I think we've covered most things here, and I think it's a pretty informative conversation.
So I'm gonna go back to listening to my music. I'll let you close this out.
Okay, all right. Well, thanks for watching this episode of Talking Points, and we'll be back with something equally compelling in the very near future.